Jyoti and Gayatri for inviting me today to talk at the 4th Rohini Ghadiok Memorial. I would like to dedicate my talk, Embracing Life Through the Experience of Death, to the memory of Rohini, who passed away in a prime of her youth. I am neither an authority on the topic of death, nor have I made a deep study on this subject. Then why am I speaking about it? In a short span of time, I have lost several of my very dear ones, and these events push me to read and reflect about death and turn to a Buddhist meditation called Vipassana. Instead of turning bitter and sad, I have gained inner peace and a feeling of wholesomeness. My talk is based on my personal experience of dealing with death. When things are going well for us, we are not challenged and we take life for granted. Usually, personal growth happens when we go through times such as facing death, rejection, failure, and disillusionment. Until death enters our lives and takes away someone we love dearly, most of us think of death as something that happens to someone else. If thoughts of death enter our minds, we quickly shout them away because they're distasteful to us. Earlier, as soon as someone talked of anything unpleasant, I used to touch wood, hoping the wood would shield me against misfortune. When my husband and I used to travel from Pune to Bombay before the expressway was built, and if anything unpleasant was mentioned, I would insist that he would stop the car, find a tree, and go and touch it. But today I have realized that even if I carry the entire forest with me, I cannot change my destiny. My personal encounter with the death of a loved one was 42 years ago when I lost my 5-month-old daughter after a brief, undiagnosed illness. I'm not a religious or ritualistic person, but I do have faith in a higher force and a belief that God knows what is best for each of us. And that belief helped me to come to terms with the death of my daughter. In 1996, at the peak of his professional career, my husband Rohinton suddenly died of a heart attack at the age of 60. 14 months later, my dog, who was with me for 12 years, passed away. A week later, my mother-in-law died. She was 97 and was suffering for years and longed for God to take her away. Within a few days, my precious son Kurush died in a road accident. He was just 25 years old with his entire life ahead of him. I will talk about my son's death a little later. 12 years before my husband died, he had a severe heart attack when he was in his late 40s. We went to the UK for a bypass surgery. On the second day after this bypass, he had a stroke. And this brilliant man did not recognize me and forgot how to read and write. My husband's illness taught me 3 important lessons. Doctors had said that my husband would never fully recover after his stroke. But with determination and grit, Rohinton wrote A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4 for months. His right side was paralyzed, and when we were in the UK, he told the physiotherapist, "Teach me how to tie my shoelace." She said, "You won't be able to do it for a month. Tie a big bow round your thigh." He tied the bow throughout the night and next day tied the shoelace. But within 2 years, he was himself and took delegations abroad and even authored a book. The lesson was, never take an expert's opinion as final, but have faith in yourself. As parents, we give great importance to education, believing nobody can take our knowledge away. Rohinton's stroke was a humbling experience and taught us that a small blood clot can wipe away all our knowledge and intelligence. So the second important lesson was, nothing in life is permanent, and do not rely on the arrogance of your intelligence, but develop wisdom. The third lesson was to take care of our health and not to take it for granted. My husband was a workaholic, smoked, and loved food which was unhealthy. From a young age, we need to nurture and invest in ourselves, physically, mentally, and spiritually. There should not be a disproportionate price we pay to be successful at work. My daughter, Meher, and her husband, Feroz, who had joined our company, Thermax, were sent to the UK to turn around a small business unit which we had recently acquired. I had promised my daughter, Meher, that I would be with her in the UK when she had her first delivery. In 1996, when I was returning after 6 months of being away, Rohinton was delighted to have me back and came to Mumbai to receive me. But before he could come to the airport, he had a massive heart attack and passed away. As soon as I landed, instead of my husband being there to receive me, I was told that he was no more. Rohinton and I had been married for 31 years and had a very close relationship that had helped each other to grow. He helped me to be independent and pushed me to become a career woman, and I brought him in touch with his feelings. Losing him was very painful since I had lost my life companion. 3 days after my husband passed away, the Thermax board decided that I should be the executive chairperson. I felt most inadequate to assume this responsibility and kept feeling small and kept saying to myself, I was given this position not on merit, but because the family had 62% shareholding. While growing up, I was never encouraged to join the small family business my father ran. My 2 brothers were constantly reminded that they would have to join the business. My repeated message was to get married and produce. Hence, in no way was I prepared to assume the responsibility of an executive chairperson. I missed Rohinton terribly and read many books on death to try and make some meaning. Reading does help, but has its limitations because it relates to our head. What brings release, healing, and transformation is the heart. Since many years, I had heard about Vipassana. I was attracted to it, but was scared as to whether I would be able to complete it. Since the rules do not allow any talking for 10 days, my husband used to jokingly tell me that he would love to see me quiet for such a long period. My husband's death had created a deep void in my life, and I was seeking for some answers and decided to attend the Buddhist meditation program. For 10 days, since we are not allowed to talk or read, we are forced to turn inwards. I got in touch with my inner strength. I also realized a few truths. Professionals who climb the corporate ladder have to fight external battles against peer competition and work their way up. People like me who had come up due to family ownership had to find internal battles, battles of self-doubt and legitimizing family inheritance. Unless these battles are resolved, a lot of energy is locked up. It is my choice to focus on my limitations and keep feeling small and inadequate, or to build on my strengths. I realize that an apple tree cannot give oranges. If I go to an apple tree and say, please give me oranges, it can never give it. So I will neither enjoy the apples and keep asking for oranges. So I realize I can never be my husband. I have to focus on what I am good at and give that out. Another important insight I got was that each of us has two sides within us, the ordinary and the extraordinary. It is easier to define ourselves as ordinary because then we can be indulgent towards ourselves and accept our mediocrity. You can say, I'm just an ordinary person, what do you expect from me? But if we accept that we are extraordinary, then we have to push ourselves to give out our best. Gandhiji was an ordinary person who overnight got in touch with his extraordinariness and became a great leader. When I'm taking life easy, I need to remind myself that I can be extraordinary. And when I'm full of my achievements and have a bloated ego, I need to tell myself that I'm pretty ordinary. So far, I have attended 4 Vipassana courses. Today, I feel more energetic and have realized we feel stressed and exhausted, not so much with physical activities, but because we are not at peace with ourselves. The end purpose of practicing meditation is to make our whole life meditative. I'm far from that end, and I'm still very reactive, impulsive, and judgmental. Daily, I practice Vipassana meditation for an hour, and that has helped my self-talk to be less negative. I can honestly say that though I have lost 2 extremely dear people, I have acquired greater peace, joy, and equanimity within myself. I speak so highly about meditation, so one would think that I go for it every year as we are asked to. But I have been only 4 times. Yesterday I was in Ahmedabad and I had done my meditation, and on the plane I had time to do it again. But a part of me kept resisting, saying, you've done it once, why do you want to do it again? Read, do something else. So while I speak eloquence of meditation, there is a part of us, all of us, that doesn't go towards what is good for our well-being. Though life and death are 2 sides of the same coin, we have learned to accept life but deny and reject death. Most people refer to death as a tragedy and a disaster. The nature of the sun is to rise and set each day. Would you label the sunset as a disaster? The nature of life is to be born and to die, and yet we who are most unprepared for this natural process look upon death as a tragedy. To me, not getting along with people who matter when they are alive and not investing in relationships which are important is a tragedy. The disaster is when we stop growing emotionally and spiritually by not questioning our old ways and not being open to change. In other words, tragedy in life is not the death of a dear one, but when we do not live a full, joyous, and meaningful life and let something vital within us die while we are alive. We need to lead our lives by choice rather than by chance or circumstances, even as chance or circumstances make harsh intrusions. Death is a social leveler and pays no attention to age, status, wealth, or position. Beauty, royalty, glitter, and glamour could not save Princess Diana. In my own world, I realized that I could not prolong my husband or my son's heartbeat for even a minute. Where death is concerned, I learned that nature is not partial to anyone. We live with untested myths like the young should not suffer and die. One visit to a pediatric hospital will make us realize that death can knock on our door at any age and at any time. Once you accept that no living person can escape death, you value the time you have on this earth, and life becomes full of meaning. After the death of a dear one, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. However much you come to terms with death, you will go through emotional and physical pain for a short length of time. Suffering happens when you keep asking, why did this happen to me? Why has no answer and leads to ongoing, unresolved misery. One thing to guard against while going through past events is not to get stuck on guilt and play the if-only game. Which could take many forms. For example, for me, it could be, if only I had not gone to the UK, I have been with my husband when he died. It is a never-ending torture which condemns us to live in the past and offers no solution. We create guilt and feel bad and punish ourselves because at times we have the mistaken belief that the more we suffer, the more we are proving to ourselves and to others that we truly love the lost one. A mother very often stays awake till her teenage son or daughter comes home. She justifies this irrational behavior by thinking it is her evidence of love. Long ago I realized that true love means letting go, giving space, and not blackmailing the living by my own neurotic behavior of not sleeping or eating. Similarly, after someone's death, if I continue to feel guilty or keep suffering, it is not a proof that I love the person that much more. Another reason for inducing guilt is because we over-focus on the negative aspects of our relationship and have forgotten the richness and the positive parts. I need to be kind to myself and say, given where I was in my development, I acted the best way I knew. Any close, meaningful, long-term relationship will have bittersweet memories. Do I want to whip myself by concentrating on areas where I have failed, or do I want to build a perspective and look at the overall relationship? We are not sure what will happen tonight or tomorrow, or whether we will have the pleasure of listening to the Sufi music, but there is one certainty from which we cannot escape. All of us sitting in this audience are going to die. It is inevitable. And I'm repeating this. All of us sitting in this audience are going to die. It is inevitable. What we do not know is when, how, and where we will die, and that is what makes it unpredictable and difficult to accept. With the practice of Vipassana, I'm discovering that happiness and peace are also inevitable for human beings. We create our own misery by being attached to pleasurable events and being averse to so-called unpleasant ones. We forget that nothing in life is permanent, and happiness and unhappiness will come and go. When we learn to accept life with awareness and equanimity, we will not go through roller coaster rides, and we will accept the saying, "This too shall pass." Before I continue with my narration, let me get back to my son, Kurush. After being away from home for 8 years, he had returned from his studies and work abroad. The main reason for his coming back was to be close to his father, whom he knew had a time bomb ticking over him. He found it extremely difficult to accept his father's death within a week of his return. He felt guilty for being away from home and bitter because God had been unfair. I tried to reach out to him, but at times it was difficult. 14 months after my husband's death, Kurush, along with his colleague, had driven to Bangalore to procure an order for our company, and on the way back, they met with an accident in which both died. The pain I felt when my husband died receded into insignificance compared to how I felt when my son died. My house, which was always full of people, was suddenly empty. As a woman, I had never lived alone, and being by myself in my bungalow was very difficult, and I wanted to shift to an apartment. But well-wishers suggested that I shouldn't make a hasty move, and today I'm grateful to them because I value and love my solitude. A year before my husband died, we had gone public. Soon after his death, the Indian economy went through a downturn and our company's performance started deteriorating. To give you an idea how badly we were doing, our publicly traded share, which was quoted at 400, came down to 36. Thanks to the hard work of my employees, support from my family, and destiny favoring us, Thermex turned around. At the age of 62, I decided to retire, and the board selected my daughter Meher as chairperson. She is by training a chemical engineer and has a good feel for finance, both of which I lacked. Many people have asked why I decided to step down when the company was doing well and I was in the glare of media. If you define your work as life, it would be very difficult to let go. But if work is part of your life, you realize there is a time to focus on something else in life. What are some of the reasons for my retiring? The first reason was, being from the HR background, I believed in succession planning and wanted to walk my talk. I also did not want our company and our family to go through the trauma I had to face due to the lack of planned succession. The second reason was that while I had the energy, I wanted to shift gears and turn to social work. The third reason was dictated by my ego. I wanted to retire while I was wanted and not undignify myself by holding on to my chair till everyone around me was eagerly waiting for me to step down. Most men find it very difficult to step down. And everyone around is saying, "Ye Buddha kabhi jayega." For me, awards and rewards which come from the external world do not mean much. All it does is to tickle my ego for a few days. What matters to me is achieving goals which I set for myself, such as meditating daily, exercising, going for walks, and creating time for people I care for. For example, my 2 grandchildren and I have enjoyed 6 holidays by ourselves, which has bonded us deeply. One of my goals is not to overeat, and yet I fail to achieve it on many days. Small things like that, it's so difficult. While I need to push myself to exercise and walk daily, I need to be a little kind to myself and learn to differentiate between discipline and obsession. A big dose of sense of humor helps us to learn not to take life too seriously because, as Groucho Marx has said, we are not going to come out of it alive. We need to internalize that our life on this earth is short, our role dispensable, and our impact inconsequential. Living in India, we tend to get insensitive to the poverty and suffering we see around us. After coming back from abroad, my son Kurush was very uncomfortable and wanted a substantial part of our personal wealth to be given for social causes. After his death, I was in search of a credible NGO and came across two amazing ones. The first one was Akanksha, and years later, Teach for India, both in the field of education. Akanksha, through the PPP model, has adopted 15 schools in Pune and Mumbai, which impart high-quality education to the economically underprivileged. TFI works towards bridging the inequity gap in education. Thermex Foundation supports 7 schools in Pune. Meher and I are on the boards of these NGOs and spend considerable amount of time and resources and find it extremely fulfilling. Impacting the lives of these children and being associated with young people through education keeps me energized and helps me to be in touch with very interesting people. I have heard many people say that after a certain age, it is difficult to make new friends. I have made new friends of all ages and from all strata throughout my life, and this has enriched me immensely. Akanksha and TFI have touched the lives of many students. Let me just cite 2 examples. Seema came to an Akanksha center. Before we started schools, we had centers from a slum in Mumbai and went on to graduate. She applied to Teach for India and got selected, and Teach for India takes 7% of people who apply. And after completing her fellowship of 2 years, joined another alum of TFI, who runs a municipal school. And after 3 years, she has become the principal of that school. Ruby lives in a slum in Pune, which is located near one of the most posh and wealthiest locality. It has no water, no electricity, nor toilets because it is considered an illegal slum. Ruby attends an Akanksha school whose principal is a TFI alum. We work very closely, Akanksha and TFI. 5 students from Akanksha and TFI schools had been shortlisted for the final interview by Mahendra World College outside Pune, and Ruby, who had studied under a kerosene lamp, was one of them. 4 students have been selected, 2 in India and 2 abroad with full scholarship. 6 of our students have been accepted also on full scholarship to the Azim Premji College in Bangalore. Though by training I'm a social worker, destiny took me to the corporate world. It was my son's death that again brought me back to social work and has given me a great sense of joy and meaning. Death of our dear ones can lead to depression, self-pity, and in a way mean psychological death for the living, or we can transform our lives positively through the experience of death. Life can be our best teacher and offer us the opportunity to convert our struggles to grace. The choice is ours. I would like to end with 2 of my favorite stories. One man died and he found himself floating in the sky, on the clouds. And he said to himself, I didn't realize I was such a good human being that God would put me in heaven. He was very happy. But after a few months, boredom set in. And he said, I wish I could have the food which I was enjoying on earth. And God suddenly gave him platters and platters of food, every variety. He was delighted. Again, a little later, he got bored and said, I wish I could have the music. And God gave him every form kind of music. Then he asked for books, and every possible book was given. Then he said, God, only one more thing. Give me a companion. And God gave him the most beautiful girl, very intelligent, and yet she didn't argue with him. So he was in bliss, really in bliss. But after a few months, he was very, very worried. What if this girl vanished? What if God took away food? What if this house went away? What if? And he made himself so miserable that he went to God and said, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but please, God, I'm miserable here. Could you send me to hell? And God said, where do you think you are, my son? And the second story is from Vipassana. Anyone been for Vipassana? Put your hands up. Good, lovely. So you'll have to bear with this, you know it. There was a young professor who went on a long voyage. And being a professor, he took stacks of books with him. And there was an old sailor who was illiterate. And he told the professor, since we will be together for a long time, please, will you teach me? And the professor said, of course. So the first day the sailor comes, the professor asks him, do you know what geology is? The sailor said, no. He says, you live on this earth and you don't know geology? 25% of your life is over. Poor sailor went back to his room dejected. Second day he was asked, do you know oceanography? Never heard of it. A professor said, 50% of your life is over. Third day, do you know what meteorology is? No. 75% of your life is over. Fourth day, the sailor comes running and says, Professor, do you know swimology? He says, no, what's that? He says, swimming, the ship is sinking and 100% of your life is over. So unless we learn the art of living, I think it's no use having all our degrees and our intelligence. Thank you very much.